Hello, and welcome to So You Think You Can Rule Persia, the podcast where we rated and reviewed all the kings of Persia from Vologases to Yazdegerd III. Today, we welcome you to the rounds part 2. My name is Serial, and my pronouns are they, them.
And I'm Umberto, my pronouns are he, him. Okay, so, welcome everybody to our second set of rounds. If you remember last time, we kicked out Alexander the Great, Antiochus IV, and Sinathrukes I.
True.
And accepted
They're all,
Darius the Great and Seleucus Nicator.
Yeah, they're all interesting in their own way. Although I was surprised to see on the Discord that some people did agree with us. And we're very happy with our decision.
Yes, so they'll be finding out right now. The episode has released as we are speaking, so they'll find out. But yeah, essentially, I've set up a poll in general just to see how people are feeling on various social media. And it looks like most people agree with us, honestly. Most people do agree that Darius is best and then Seleucus is second. Our Discord has a slightly higher preference for Alexander, just like by one vote. But, yeah, stuff happens. So overall, people are reasonably accepting of our choices here. But I think today is going to be slightly more of, I don't know if controversial, but sort of less clear cut. I imagine that there's going to be more uncertainty in what our audience chooses next time. Because today, for the Royal Hunt in the Garden, we have Shapur II with 78 points, Orodes II with 57.1, Kavad I with 70.1, Vologases IV with 48.4, and finally Mithridates the Great with 61.6 points. So, Serial, just to start off, do you have any strong memories of any of these, or are they all sliding off your brain?
The problem is that even if I remember some of the names, since names repeat, sometimes I just don't know which one was which.
Fair, yes.
Because I have not put that much energy into keeping my memory straight. Because I can just go back to the podcast and re-listen to everything.
Yeah, easy. It's a reference there.
I will pull up my portraits, and then maybe something else will come to mind, because I tend to draw particular
you can have
moments.
A look at which of these work. Yeah,
or I tend to draw at least my impression of said king, so that should
I tend to draw the highlights of what's going on
if
over
there
there.
are highlights. Since they are Shahanshahs, I assume we did have some highlights to draw.
Yeah, there are enough highlights that they are kind of worth remembering for a certain amount. So you can have a bit of a look at which these are and see what, if anything, comes to mind. Especially, I mean, Shapur II is very indicative, I'd say. But
yeah, let me pull up the portraits. So we had Shapur II.
That's right.
Are you giving them to me chronologically?
No, I'm giving them to you in the order they were extracted. So chronologically, it's Mithridates II, or Mithridates the Great first, then Orodes II, then Vologases IV, then Shapur II, and then Kavad I.
Yeah, Mithridates II. I do remember it was incredibly intense and amazing.
Yes, very much.
And he's known as the Great for a reason, so I assume he's gonna be up there.
I mean, yeah, we'll go through it in the recap, but there's a lot of exciting
Orodes
things going on.
II, I have him drawn with the head on a spike of... Who was it? Valentinian?
Crassus.
Oh, even better.
Yeah, exactly. The worst man in ancient Rome.
MVP. I love Orodes II. This is great. Down with capitalism. Who else did we have?
we had Shapur II, Vologases IV, and Kavad I.
So Vologases IV, right, is trying to save the kingdom from the shadows.
Yes.
We'll see how well he did. Shapur II. Right. Shapur II was incredible. It was the king that was crowned in womb.
Indeed, yes.
And then did have an incredibly long reign and did amazing things.
Yeah, reigned for like 70 years or so.
Against all odds. Yeah. That was incredible, yeah. Shapur II and?
Kavad I, I think you're missing.
Kavad I? Yes. Enough of you. With the noble... Who was this noble?
Yeah, Sukra, the noble who had
Sukra.
sort of saved the empire from the nobles at some point, but had gotten a bit too big for his boots. So those are the kings we're going to have...
Cool.
Yes.
I am a fan of any king that will take the nobles down a peg, but I think when you're competing with Shapur II and Mithridates the Great, might not be enough, but we'll see.
We'll see. I'm going to go into recap about them, and we can see what their strengths and weaknesses are, but we can see how that goes. But first of all, we'd like to go through our second category, battle hardness, and we can reminisce about the best and worst battle hardnesses of their times. So, Serial, for battle hardness, to start up, we have 4 kings who are 20 out of 20. So 4 kings who got the highest possible marks for being...
All of them are here.
Warriors. So,
all right.
These are...
It was Alexander. We already discussed it.
Alexander got a 20, correct. Next up, let's see if you remember, was another one of the ones yesterday.
Oh, right. Was it? You say yesterday, but we did not record this yesterday.
the other week, yeah.
Was it Seleucus? I don't know
Yep,
if
Seleucus got 20.
Yeah,
that's right.
Because there was a lot of conquest.
Yes, that's right. Then up on top marks, we also have Shapur I and Mithridates the Great as well. So one of our protagonists for today. And so we need to decide how would you sort these top 4? So I'll just give you a brief recap of why they got these marks. So Alexander the Great, well, he conquered the Achaemenid Empire. He only stopped conquering when his own men said, "We're just winning too much. Please let us go home. This is terrible." And yeah, he's Alexander the Great. He is known as the guy who's good at war and fighting. So it's important. Seleucus Nicator.
If anyone was going to get that.
Yeah. And then we have Seleucus Nicator, Seleucus I. He managed to basically take from 1,000 men, build up one of the largest empires of the successors, basically reunify Alexander's empire, and then was eventually murdered for it, but he just has victory after victory and managed to consolidate and establish a legacy that will last for centuries. So, good start. Shapur I mostly kicks Roman butt, which we appreciate about him. Yes. He is the one with the relief where he has 3 Roman emperors kneeling or dead before him because he manages to constantly defeat the Romans, constantly sack Antioch multiple times, deport a bunch of the population all the way into the empire, and he is the first person to capture a Roman emperor alive and just keep him as a footstool because he could. So that's pretty cool. Shapur I did a great job, so very impressive. And then we have Mithridates the Great. Mithridates the Great's claim to fame is that we're not really exactly sure what he did because of a lack of sources, but he defeated the nomads who were threatening the empire so hard that they didn't pose a threat to the empire for the next 200 years. Don't know what exactly he did.
That was incredible.
Whatever it was.
Yeah, we don't even know. This is wild. But I guess mostly we go off of Roman sources.
Yeah, exactly. They're
don't
very
we?
distant right now.
And since they were,
Yeah, and also Mithridates the Great is the one who consolidated the Parthian Empire properly so it could become an actual empire, and he was the first to bring Armenia into our sphere of influence. So having Armenia for the first time is thanks to Mithridates the Great. So how would you rank
this
these
will
top
be the start
four?
of the start of a headache.
Exactly. But hey, he didn't know it at the time. He thought it was going to be fine. So Sarah, how would you rate these top four? How do you think it's best to sort them out? Do you have anybody who stands out for you as like absolutely the top or absolutely the bottom? Or not really?
Well, they all have a 10 for a reason.
I mean, yeah, they've all gotten the maximum amount. But if we had to choose,
it's incredibly unfair that there's barely any sources for Mithridates the Great.
Yeah.
Because I do think he did incredibly well. Obviously, as history then shows.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't know how he did it. So
yeah, that's disappointing. But wow.
Then we have Alexander and Seleucus.
That's right, two of the Hellenistic, and then Shapur I.
Right. I'm sorry, I'm bad with names, so I'm sure our listeners are like, oh my god, Serial, he just told you, but I'm, bear with me for a second. Where's Shapur I? Here. Yes, with subjugating the Romans, basically.
Yeah. That was a good, strong rule. I mean, the Romans were terrified for decades.
That is pretty good, especially knowing our centuries-long relationship with the Romans.
Yeah.
How... Because some of these victories were measured in territory gained, but some of them are just basically stability economically and politically. Because in territory gain, I'm pretty sure Alexander is just
if that's the metric, then Alexander is top.
But that's not everything, because, well, as we repeat over and over again, it was for nothing. We kept none of that, or almost none of that, because he, I think having the ability to subjugate your arch enemies to a point where you have peace for a fairly long time afterwards is, to me, more impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Especially since the Romans are very skilled at the art of war.
Oh yeah, definitely. It wasn't going up against somebody, on life support. It was
which is why they will continue being a threat and our enemies for, centuries.
Yeah, exactly. Until we're both destroyed at the same time at the end. It's great stuff.
Yep. Wow. There truly isn't that much of a difference between war and love, really.
No, not at all. So do you think... I'm getting a feeling that you're putting Shapur first among these four victors?
Probably. I want to give Mithridates more points, but there's not that many sources, so we don't really know that much.
No, exactly. I think my broad... What I broadly have in my head is, honestly, I think the Hellenistic fellas have done more, mostly because there was just more to do. So I'd go for Alexander, Seleucus, Shapur, and then Mithridates in that order. Do you disagree? Because this is just pure military skill. This isn't how good were you at reigning. This is just, if you're on a battlefield.
I do think Alexander has to be higher up there. I don't want to give it to him, mostly because I know how it ends after he conquers all of that, and it's just But I guess we are judging just military prowess. So
yeah, that's right. If he could do one thing well, military was it.
He would have to be up there. But I think If we compare Seleucus to Shapur I,
Yes.
because they both go into Roman territory, basically.
I mean, geographically, I guess the Romans aren't much of a thing around Seleucus' time, but yeah.
What are the differences?
I mean, you can look at it, I think, so why I'd be putting Seleucus first is because essentially he just takes 1,000 men that Ptolemy lent him, and then he conquers all the east and builds an empire. Shapur was coming off the high of his father Ardashir the Great, and used all these armies very well and very effectively to take over Rome. Or, not really take over Rome, but, defeat the Romans multiple times. So I think that just for the virtue of starting with very little, I think I admire Seleucus more.
Yep. You make a good point.
All right. So are we going with Alexander first, Seleucus second, Shapur third, and Mithridates fourth?
Yeah, I think you've convinced me.
Very well. So this is our order of greatest fighters in our pre-Islamic Iranian history. And in fifth place, just to round them out, we have another one of our contestants for today, which is Shapur II with a 19. Let me see. Was it you or me that gave him a 9 instead of a full 10? It was me. I wasn't as impressed. I just gave him a 9. So essentially, what did he do? Well, he defeated the Arabs so hard that eventually they stopped raiding for centuries, and also they put a curse on him that one day they would be back to avenge him and destroy the empire. Perhaps this was written after the Islamic conquest. Likely, but, it's always nice to have a curse. Then Shapur II, he led a very long, continuous war against the Romans, against Constantius II. And that was basically like trading forts. It was really, slow, not exactly trench warfare, but that's the vibe. And then eventually when Julian the Apostate popped in, he was defeated because he wasn't very good at it. And Shapur managed to get a really favorable deal out of the Romans because, well, their army was trapped and their emperor was dead, and they elected a new one that was also trapped. So that's how it went. It was simple enough.
Yeah.
And he also fought the Chionites, these nomads from the steppe, and he also sort of invited them in to help out with the Roman issues, and then he had to fight them a bit afterwards. So I thought it was very good, but not a perfect record. So I'm comfortable enough saying that he is in fifth place in our battle hardness throughout the whole score. But impressive to have fifth place out of 92.
Yes.
That's very good. And next we go into our lowest 5 for battle hardness. So our lowest 5, again, how is this calculated? It is calculated by seeing who has the highest score with the lowest battle hardness. And all these are people with 0 battle hardness, but relatively high scores. So first up is Diocles. Diocles, you remember, his whole deal was scheming and manipulating people and making himself king at last. But he didn't really fight at all because, well, even if we looked at the Assyrian sources at the time...
We were at the very beginning. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. According to those Assyrian sources, he was actually defeated and enslaved eventually. So if we believe that those were the same people, then definitely not very good at fighting, but still got a high enough score that we respect him for. So that's pretty good. And then for second place, we have Kavad II Shiroe, the one who killed Khosrow II, and did a very impressive job in scheming and manipulating and murdering and doing horrible things. But he didn't really fight because he wasn't involved in that before as a prince because, well, he wasn't meant to succeed in the first place. And then what he did was just make a peace with the Romans, which was all right, but not great, and didn't really fight back. So that's a full 0. Next up on number 3 is Azarmidokht. Azarmidokht, again, good on scheming, good on shock factor. She was very cool. We liked her. We thought she was fun. But eventually she got defeated by the son of the man she had murdered, by this Rostam Farrukhzad. So she tried to fight back, but eventually the city of Ctesiphon was captured and she was blinded and eventually died. So sad end for her. Not great in battle hardness. Then fourth place we have Seleucus IV Philopator, who you'll remember is the guy just after Antiochus the Great, and he definitely casts a different figure to his father because, well, he was living in a world where the Romans were more powerful, and Seleucus, rather than going into battle against the Romans like his father had done and losing, Seleucus decides to just give away his children to Rome, causing no end of pain in succession crises.
Yep.
But essentially he just says, well, it's worth the peace with the Romans. I'm sure this will be fine. Everything will be okay.
Yeah, because if we know something about the Romans is that they keep their word.
Yeah, exactly. They're very nice people. They're perfectly fine, Sarah. It's okay.
Sure.
And then last or fifth among the worst battle hardness people is Sogdianus. Sogdianus got a relatively high score for his very cool death in the Ash Room. He was featured among the best deaths last time.
Yeah.
He was also scheming. He killed his brother Xerxes II, but then he ended up on the wrong side of Parasatis. And he was defeated in battle. His brother Darius II managed to take control of the empire. And, well, Sogdianus lived a brief and inglorious reign overall. But, overall, we scored him highly enough. So he is still worth remembering, at least in this area over here. So there we are. And now, Cyril, which dynasty do you think had the highest battle hardness? What would you guess?
Well, probably the Hellenistics. I'm not sure.
Well, not exactly. I was honestly shocked to find this as well, but apparently the average score of our top scores are the Achaemenids, with an average score of 7.54 out of 20 for battle hardness. So that was pretty impressive.
Damn. Yes.
Then second place are the Argeads, as you mentioned, mostly carried by Alexander with a 7.33 out of 20. And third place are the Medians with 7.25 out of 20.
Yeah, that does not surprise me, actually.
The Medians,
because
again, mostly Cyaxares did a cool thing. But yeah. Cyaxares and Phraortes did a cool thing.
Empire. Yeah.
It was very impressive. But then we're followed up by the Seleucids with a 7 out of 20. Kind of surprising, seeing how much they eventually failed, but, fair enough. You go.
Well.
I guess they have Seleucus, and the early Seleucids are pretty good. We also have Antiochus the Great, so they're doing a reasonable amount of stuff.
To have a lasting dynasty, you have to have some good stuff in there at some point.
At least. Next, we have the Sassanids with 6.88 out of 20, probably having a bunch of non-fighty kings at the end really tanked their scores, because there are a few kings where they're just dominated by the nobles, and it's not great, so they can't do much. And finally, the Arsacids with a 6.58 out of 20 are the lowest of them all. I think they start out really well, but eventually they sort of are victims of the Romans a lot. Like Ctesiphon is sacked several times under the Arsacids. They have all these interminable civil wars. It's not ideal for them. They could have been improved. But I'll just show you the Bayesian adjusted mean score. So Achaemenids are
I was going to ask.
Yes. Achaemenids are again top with 7.21. But then we have a tie between the Argeads and the Medians with 7. Apparently the fact that this sort of compensates Alexander a little bit. And then Seleucids are right after.
Alexander is an outlier and should not have been taken into consideration. He's the Spider's Georg of military prowess.
Very much. Then afterwards we have the Seleucids with 6.96 and the Sassanids with 6.90, very close together. The fact that there were so many Sassanids probably damaged them, but they're closer with Seleucids if they had similar reign. And then we have the Arsacids at the very end. They're just 6.71. They're okay, but they're not doing great. Again, as we've seen, they're fine. They're not amazing. And so there we go. That is the battle hardness. That is a roundup of what we had in battle hardness. And now it's time to review our candidates for today and see which way we make our minds up. So first of all, we start with Shapur II. He was the leader of this group. He was made a king as a fetus, as we remember. His mother's belly was crowned, and he ruled. He was the youngest ruler ever, because of course. He then grew up.
The only time that this actually worked out.
Yeah, exactly.
So what this tells us
surprising.
is that if you have a child king or teenager king, your empire will suffer. So you have to crown them before they're born, and then it's fine.
Yes, then it's actually okay. I mean, to be fair, that didn't go very well with baby Alex, who was crowned at birth. But, maybe it's just going before birth, which helps.
Exactly. That's not the same. They did it wrong.
Yeah. So Shapur II, made king as a fetus. He grew up relatively unharmed, surprising everybody. The nobles didn't interfere. It was just fine for some reason. Who knows? But then...
The gods were like, we're gonna take care of this one, actually.
Yeah. But then he launched a massive punitive expedition against the Arabs when he came of age, when he was 16, and he became known as Shapur the Shoulder Shatterer. So, because he ripped off people's shoulders, which was pretty intense. Yeah. He then conquered the Kushan Empire in the east. There was a sort of semi-vassal, semi-not empire in the east of the Sassanids, and he managed to conquer it and fully absorb it into the empire, which was pretty impressive. He also then established a stronger Zoroastrian basis to the state as a reaction against Constantine. You'll remember that Constantine said, "Oh no, all Christians all over the world are my subjects, even the ones in your empire, so watch out." And so as a reaction... Yeah, and so as a reaction, Shapur decided to, establish Zoroastrianism as more of a central feature of the empire and make sure that everybody knew which religion was correct and which way to go about it.
Which religion is correct? Just so you know.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just informing you.
Yeah. He then fought a long war with Rome, which I mentioned before in his battle hardness round, which was ultimately victorious against Julian, which managed to get a bunch of Armenia under control, a bunch of the Caucasus, take new lands. It was all very powerful, and this caused peace for 200 years. And this caused the empire's capital, Ctesiphon, to be stable and unattacked by enemies until the very end of the empire. So,
that's just so
long-lasting,
like,
very
I'm sorry,
impressive
but...
peace. There's a reason he scored very high, yeah. He then managed to keep the nobles under control. We don't hear about noble uprising or noble rebellions under him. He does very well. Whatever he was doing, be it through terror or kindness, he managed to keep them under control and everything was broadly fine. As we said, slightly flip side, he invites the Chionites to help him out, but ends up at war with them. So this nomadic front is a little bit mixed. I think he was the first to invite nomads over to help him. And then find out, oh no, wait, they actually don't care about my well-being. We need to fight them now. So that was a whole thing.
I mean, who would have known,
Yeah. And then he built plenty of cities and made the empire a lot more prosperous and made sure that everything was very strong and stable for the 70 years that he ruled, which is a very significant time period. And while I'll end up with a quote from the Shahnameh that told us that at the end of his life, the world had become a garden within which grew roses without thorns, and he had no enemies anywhere, and evil had no refuge in all the world.
I remember you reading this.
Yes.
In the episode.
It's very good. It's a fun
I don't think
time.
anybody can top that. I'm sorry, but this is just the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, so Shapur II, very highly rated for today's competition. We'll see if anybody stands up to him, or maybe somebody is a lot cooler. We'll find out. Next up is Orodes II. Orodes II was a Parthian king. He came to the throne after killing his father together with his brother. Then his brother took the throne, and there was a whole civil war. They fought each other. Orodes wins. Hooray. Then Orodes is the subject of the first Roman-Parthian War, of the first of this massive cycle that will end in, the
Yes.
600s. So he is the first war, and he does the amazing feat of destroying Crassus's army. Crassus invades. He thinks, "Oh no, I'm compensating for being worse than Caesar and Pompey. I'll try and conquer the east, and that will be fine." But no, Crassus is entirely surrounded.
Absolutely
his men
be
are
fine.
destroyed. And Crassus himself is killed, and his head is used as a prop in a play for Orodes, because, that's what you get.
Caesar and Pompey failed, but that's just, they were like, surely I won't because I'm better than them.
Yeah, and
they were
he's
just
rich.
incompetent.
Money
It's
is the
not that
best
it's actually
superpower,
hard
of course.
Exactly.
And, Carrhae is so significant. Carrhae is a massive defeat. It is many times larger than the defeat at Teutoburg, which made, Augustus mad with grief, saying, "Give me back my legions." This was 7 legions entirely destroyed. And it is so important that so many other people will try and reconquer. Like, Mark Antony will try and avenge the Battle of Carrhae. And in the end, the only acceptance that we'll have in the end is Augustus finally declaring victory after a diplomatic deal with Parthia a few decades later. So this is such a scar in the Roman
Which
psyche.
I guess is a victory.
Yeah, exactly.
As in, you can stop fighting now.
Yeah, you can stop fighting. They've returned the eagles, and he marks that as a victory. It is such an important thing for Augustus that you probably have in mind the typical statue of Augustus, the one where he has the whole armor with like engravings and pictures of his victories on it. In center stage in that armor is the Parthians returning the eagles of Carrhae.
Damn.
That's how important
But
it
that was not a good victory. Oh my god. Yeah, so it was that important, even though, Yeah,
the Romans were so scarred by this that it was really intense. Well then, after this, Orodes tried to capitalize on his victories and invaded the Roman East, but ultimately was defeated. He almost conquered Anatolia, almost conquered Syria and Palestine, but ultimately he was defeated by the Roman forces, although he came very close to victory. We also had the very sad story of his favorite son and heir, Pacorus, being raised up to be king, raised up to rule, but eventually being killed in battle at last. And then last but not least, Orodes II is murdered by the son he had appointed as heir after basically being heartbroken from the death of his favorite son. And, well, he just dies this sort of tragic end. So that's Orodes II. Any thoughts, Serial? How does he compare to Shapur, for example?
Yeah, lots of action.
Yeah, a lot of stuff.
It's a good story. And anyone who gets to scar the Romans like he did is just... has a win in my heart,
Yeah, definitely. All right, and then we go for our third person, Kavad I. Kavad I was great. Kavad was expected to be a puppet king in a critical period.
True.
And he had this long political duel with his puppet master, Sucra, who is now, in our VIP section of the Paradise Gardens.
Yes.
And in the end, Sucra was executed, and Kavad decided that the best way to defeat the nobles was a complete communist revolution under Mazdakism, to reform the empire, burn everything down, and rebuild it in his image. That was very fun. Apparently, he decided... This is making me
think that maybe in my Choose Your Own Adventure game, this was inspired by him, and I should have heeded his warnings.
I mean, you say that, Serial, but eventually, Kavad is, due to all this revolutionary activity, he is overthrown and imprisoned in the Fortress of Oblivion.
True.
He is held in the Fortress of Oblivion for a while.
Doesn't he have a Count of Monte Cristo thing?
Yes, exactly. He then later, through the help of his wife, he manages to escape and then uses the Hephthalite nomads off in the east to help him regain the empire. And at last he comes back and takes revenge on all those who had wronged him. He then uses all this leeway to introduce some massive reforms to the empire, try and centralize it, and reduce its reliance on the nobility. It's thanks to him, in large part, that Khosrow II will be able to have a unified, strong national army that he can use to finally crush the Romans, or at least get close enough to do that. You can also say on the downside that it is thanks to Kavad that the noble leaders of armies become powerful enough to potentially overthrow kings. So that's a mixed victory. But yeah, then he has a war with Rome, which ends in victory, relatively organized, relatively good. No massive gains, but still tribute is given. He then has a massive war with the Hephthalites, who helped him out, and this ends in a broad victory with the end of the nomad crisis. You remember that a few kings before Kavad, Peroz I was killed entirely by these Hephthalite nomads. It was a terrible defeat. The empire risked falling, but now Kavad has ended this crisis. Very impressive. And then he tries to have his son Khosrow I adopted by the Roman emperor, Justin, but apparently this isn't fine, this doesn't work out, and they insult Khosrow, so Kavad decides to go to war with the Romans. The war seems to be going very well overall, but eventually he just dies. Also, just in the last years of his life, he goes very far back on his Mazdakite beliefs, and while it was unclear if he or Khosrow did it personally, he does end up having Mazdak himself executed together with all his closest followers, so he makes use of this religion and then throws it away. Okay, and so how would you place Kavad with our previous two contestants? It's definitely very interesting. The fact that he tries to reform the empire for good is very intense, but how do you think he stands up against the other two?
Nobody's gonna come close to Shapur II. I'm
Fair
sorry.
enough. Okay.
In my mind, that this is clear.
Okay. Yeah, then our fourth contestant is Vologases IV. Vologases IV shows up in a rather obscure way. The problem with Vologases is that we didn't have many sources because the Sassanids come right after him and they've sort of removed all these sources. So what he does, through some mysterious means, his father was a losing rebel in the empire and was just fighting the official king, Vologases III. But then eventually, when Vologases III actually dies, our Vologases IV manages to become ruler of the whole empire. Despite being a distant cousin, he takes over with an unknown plot. He may have killed the previous king, he may have just waited until he died and fulfilled a coup. We're not sure, but he does something very impressive, something very Darius, because, well, the empire holds together and he founds the new dynasty. Or rather, he finds a new branch of the dynasty, which is the one that will rule Armenia for centuries under the Sassanids after a while. And what Vologases does, he starts to do some of the transformation that the empire will have under the Sassanids. He starts to consolidate the empire, absorb some vassal kingdoms, make sure everything is a lot more organized, a lot more centralized. He then has a war with the Romans. This war with the Romans goes quite well at the start. He manages to invade Syria, does quite a significant job, but it eventually does end in a sack of Seleucia on the Tigris, the capital. So, not ideal, not great. But ultimately, he does manage to sort of bring the empire out of this death spiral it was in. It was under constant civil wars. This is shortly after Trajan, shortly after all that mess where the empire was split into 3 parts. It was a whole thing. But, unfortunately, we don't have too many sources thanks to the Sassanids popping up right after. It would be very cool, but you depicted him emerging from the darkness, saving the empire because, well, he did sort of keep it stable enough to last for, well, a couple more generations at least. So, I noticed that we have many Parthians. This is a majority Parthian round. But how would you rate between our two Parthians, Orodes II and Vologases IV?
Orodes II strikes me as more impressive.
Fair enough.
I'd love your input, though.
Yeah, Vologases IV, I'll just read through his categories. He has a 1 in final moments, an 8 in battle hardness, a 15 in scheminess for the whole plot, a 6 of shock factor, a 12 of air and shine, a 2 of face of faces, and a 4.4 of lengthiness. So he manages, I think the main appeal of him is that he manages to rule a very long time and stabilize the empire. I do agree that Orodes II, let's look at his scores, he has a 7 for final moments, 16 for battle hardness, 4 for scheminess, 12 for shock factor, 14 for air and shine, 2.3 for face of faces, and 1.8 out of lengthiness. Orodes kind of leaves a more unstable empire, but I do agree that I think he is probably more influential ultimately. Like, Vologases is interesting overall, but I feel like he's falling behind.
I mean, yes, we have given Shahanshah to all of these for a reason.
Yeah, very much so. Also, since I forgot the scores for the other one, let me reiterate them. Shapur II,
yes,
one of our highest, I think our second highest scorer, since that's where we've placed him. Shapur II has a 2 for final moments, a 19 for battle hardness, a 7 for scheminess, a 20 for shock factor, an 18 for air and shine, a 5 for face of faces, and a 7 for lengthiness. So he has the highest lengthiness score, a very impressive face of faces because we have the great silver plates. He's the start of all the fancy silver plates of the Sassanid Empire. Shocking, well,
True.
He keeps the nobles under control, as we've seen, and Aaron Shine, he does a really good job. Starts a few persecutions, but broadly things are going well. And then Kavad, which I mentioned before, Kavad has a 1 final moments, 14 battle hardness, not too impressive, but broadly interesting. 15 for scheminess, 16 for shock factor, whole religious revolution thing, 16 for Aaron Shine. There are issues with the whole revolution thing. 4 for face of faces, and a 4.1 out of lengthiness. So, very impressive. And last but not least, Sarah, we need to talk about Mithridates the Great, Mithridates II. So, the Mithridates fall a bit in the problem of both being very good. Like, Mithridates the first and second and Shapur the first and second are both very good. So, calling someone the Great is complicated, but let's look at Mithridates. So, he becomes king as a young man, with recent kings being all killed by the nomadic Saka and Yuezhi. So this is a point in the empire when it might just break apart as soon as it was born. It's really very precarious. And we don't know how, but he defeats the nomads so hard that there will be no nomad threat for 300 years, which is very impressive. Who knows how he did that? Yep. Whatever it was, shocking. He founds the Silk Road after contact with China. That's very cool. He communicates with Han Wudi, the ruler of China, and decides that, yes, this is going to be a trade route we're going on. We're going to be securing the trade routes. He truly consolidates the Parthian Empire after its foundation in the east and west. He makes sure that, no, the Seleucids are not going to have a chance to return and pull an Antiochus VII and save everything. No, they're done. This empire is here to stay for centuries. And well, while Mithridates I made the empire, Mithridates II made sure it continued to exist. So that's very impressive. He then made Tigranes the Great his vassal in Armenia. As I mentioned, this is the first time Armenia becomes this border region. So he manages to greatly expand all the empire. He conquers more land thanks to Seleucid dissolution. Starts to get into Syria, almost ready to put a puppet king on the Seleucid throne for his control. But overall, we saw that within his empire, he was broadly tolerant and helpful. So he names himself a friend to the Greeks in the empire and says that he is going to be helpful to all of them and make sure that they thrive as well as all the other citizens. But he also has inscriptions around Behistun, where Darius the Great had made his inscriptions. To increase his legitimacy, he puts himself next to these kings of old, saying, I am a king of kings again. He also reintroduces the title of King of Kings after it had been lost for a while, and from him on, it will be constantly used by all his descendants. So, very impressive, very good. And if we look at the scores, Mithridates II gets a 0.5 for final moments, very uninteresting death, natural causes mostly, 20 for battle hardness, 3 for scheminess, 11 for shock factor, 20 for air and shine, 4 for face of faces, and a 3.1 for lengthiness. So a long reign, a stable reign, a good job overall. The slight demerit against him is that he does leave a rather messy succession period, and after him the Parthian Dark Ages start. But that's mostly due to a lack of sources and, well, the elective system that the Parthians have. So there we go, Serial. Those are our 5 contestants. Is there anybody in your mind that is either immediately yes or immediately no?
Well, no, like they're all really impressive. I have a soft spot for Shapur II, and I would put him at the top, I think.
Okay. Fair. I would agree that I think Shapur Well, good. I have a counter argument, you know? I'll see.
Okay.
So, I would say Shapur is probably one of the more impressive ones. But my opposition to Shapur is that while he is like strong and steady and very straightforward, there isn't anything massively flashy in his reign. Like the fact that he was crowned as, you know, an unborn is very fun. I mean, you have it in your portrait, but there isn't like one great thing that says, "Oh, this is why Shapur." Like, I think it's interesting because of like an assembly of reasons, but I feel like he is just, you know, constantly competent and skilled, but he is not as flashy as somebody who is like Kavad, for example. Like, I would tell people about Kavad starting a revolution and deciding to entirely change everything and escaping from the Fortress of Oblivion and all that. That's pretty cool. That's a lot more flashy than Shapur, which is like, you know, standard good competence for 70 years, which is admirable, but is it the sort of impressive thing that you want to tell people about and want to, you know, get to the top and say, ah, yes, you're the best?
I guess you're right.
I feel like, so out of these
just
kings...
had such a good time.
Oh, no, fair enough.
At Shapur's episode.
Had 2 episodes, one of our rare 2-parters. So, yeah.
Yes.
And so I'd say out of all of these, I'm afraid that Vologases IV is interesting, but probably doesn't deserve to get through because we just don't have the sources. It's just disappointing.
I would agree with you.
So, yeah. Sorry, Vologases. While he's riding out into the hunt, he is sadly, terribly mauled by a massive lion. Nobody knows where the lion came from. The sources are unclear. So we have 4 fellas left. I think they're all very good. I have a soft spot for Kavad and Mazdakism. Kavad thinking, what's the solution to nobles? Communism, probably. Will that be an issue for me being the king? No. That'll be fine.
No, never. How could it be?
So I do like that. I'm more inclined towards Kavad as my top pick, I think. I'm not sure, but it could be. And, okay, well, let's look at the ones we've not spoken of. Orodes II and Mithridates the Great. What are your thoughts, Sarah? How do you think they stack up against the other contestants? Because I do like how Orodes has...
With Mithridates, we have a bit of the same issue. I mean, we do have a fair amount of information for, like, having little sources, I guess.
Yeah, it's one of the rare times we actually have Chinese sources from Mithridates, which is pretty cool. So I think that's cool. I'd say between Orodes... So I like Orodes because he has this whole tragic story where it's like, he has this great victories and then he almost wins, but then eventually his son dies and he's eventually killed by this other terrible son after he'd lost all hope and his heart was broken. I feel like that's quite tragic, very nice. And, you know, you have the centerpiece of Carrhae, which is just such a pivotal point in the Roman-Iranian relations. This is basically what tells the Romans, no, you can't just conquer Iran like you've done with all the other countries you have.
Yeah.
This is going to be your arch nemesis for 500 years.
Welcome, you've unlocked a new level
of
warfare.
So I think that's very cool. But again, Mithridates has multiple things. While Orodes doesn't do much politically, we don't know much about it. Mithridates does consolidate the empire. He is friends to the Greeks. That's pretty cool. He has this whole legitimacy project, the Achaemenids. And, well, he has the Silk Road on one hand, city building on the other hand, and also defeating the nomads so hard that they don't come back.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like unless you have any oppositions, I think that Orodes II is fourth place out of these fellas. What do you think?
I'm happy to agree. I feel not qualified enough to make the call. But yeah, I guess I could be convinced by arguments either way. So this sounds as good to me as anything.
Fair enough. And okay, last we have Shapur II, Kavad I, and Mithridates the Great. All together, who do you think deserves, or rather, who needs to be kicked out? Because we have two of them are definitely going to make it through. Who do you think is, like, again, you're going up on the street, somebody tells you, quick, tell me about a king. Which of these people are you thinking of last? Like, if somebody's telling you, as often happens, oh, you do a podcast about Persian kings, like, that's cool. It's like, who would you recommend I listen to first? It's like, which of these do you think is
probably Mithridates the Great?
Mithridates,
actually.
You think? Really? Why so?
As like, who should I listen to first? Because it's a good episode.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I mean, good episode, definitely. You think Mithridates?
I was going to go for Shapur, but I'm like, it's a two-parter, and I don't think,
Yeah. Because, Sarah, I was thinking, if you think Mithridates, and my favorite is Kavad, that means we'd have to kick Shapur II out. Are you willing to stand by this?
I have to say, God, I like Shapur II so much, but you did mention that he, like, the most impressive thing about his reign is that he has a stable reign.
Yeah, it's like, I think he's cool. I think to compare him to somebody in Totalis Rankium, he is very much like Basil II, whereas, like, extremely competent, very good at his job, but not super flashy. Like, there isn't this one thing where you can say, like, if you ask me to tell you, why is Shapur II cool? It's like, well, there's the, being crowned before being born thing, and longest reign in history for 70 years, and he does a good job about it, but I think it's just like slow, good incremental things, which is important for an empire. You'd want to live under him during the empire.
Like, he is still one of my favorites, but he might not be the most memorable.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Kavad has...
though, because, like...
I mean, hey...
He got crowned before being born! What do you mean?
That's cool, yeah, exactly. But then you have Kavad, which is like, starts a communist revolution, is in the Fortress of Oblivion.
Yes.
His wife helps him escape, and then he goes
I have to agree with you. Actually, I have to agree with you. I can't believe... Okay, so we're keeping Kavad because we have to.
Kavad's great. Come on.
Between Shapur and Mithridates, it has to be Mithridates. It has to be Mithridates. Despite having less sources,
I feel like it's just so much altogether. Mithridates, Shapur, very cool. Definitely deserves to be here. Definitely deserves to be the second highest scorer. But I think that he's not going to fit there. So, do we want to do this, Serial? Are we ready?
I can't believe. Yeah.
Well, off we go. So, in our extreme battle, Orodes II is suddenly killed by an arrow in the dark. It looks suspiciously Roman, but eventually he goes off. And then Shapur II, King of Kings, second highest scorer, the leader of this round, he is unfortunately taken down by... What animal do you think would take down Shapur? What are we hunting that would take Shapur down? 2 lions.
Well,
he
he's not
could
that
have
flashy,
2
so-
lions. Oh, not
Okay,
flashy.
yeah. I
Going
was
for an
gonna be like, I don't
onager,
know if he
kicking
would
him in
be.
the head.
I don't think. Well, no, he deserves better. But I was like, I don't think he would want to be hunting lions. Because why?
Fair enough. Let's say, yeah. Let's just give him a Roman end. His belt gets stuck in the antler of a gazelle, and he's dragged around until death. So sorry, Shapur.
No, no.
Off you go.
Come on, he deserves better. Why are you like this?
Well, Sarah, you said no to lions. Gazelle it was. So that means that Kavad I and Mithridates the Great move on to the next rounds, and just to see how they're going to be facing each other, we have that. They will at us. We'll see next time, Sarah, what everybody thought. But apparently, so Kavad I will be facing Seleucus in the next round, while Mithridates will be facing Darius. So we'll see how those work out. But yeah, that'll be fun. And next round, Serial, who are we going to have? Next round is still going to be very exciting. We're going to have Khosrow I, Bahram VI, Bahram Chobin, Ardashir the Great, Xerxes I, and Mithridates I. So, again, difficult decisions will abound, but next time we'll find out who gets to win. And yeah, so in the meantime, if you'd like to support us, there are many ways to do that. You can join us on our Patreon, where we have a bunch of extra episodes you can follow up on. And hey, we're going to be releasing some of our intelligent speech episodes, and I think at the end of June we're going to be having our pilot episode, so you get to find out how awkward and weird we were at the start. That'll be fun. Good stuff. If instead you'd rather not support us monetarily, you can... we'd appreciate it if you can give us a review on your podcast app of choice, so you can let other people know what you enjoyed. Tell everybody that Shapur was robbed. Who knows? This feels like a controversial take. We'll find out what it's like.
Yeah.
But yeah, in that case, without any further ado, we hope you enjoy this episode, and we'll see you next time with the third round. Goodbye.
Bye.